Section 5 continues what you learned in Section 4 with some important closing thoughts. You'll learn about completing incident reports after an incident, should you be required to. You'll learn the specific steps for using emergency oxygen systems used in dive emergencies, and how to manage an accident scene while waiting for help. This section also goes over considerations for exiting the water with an unresponsive diver. After an accident that requires contacting emergency medical care or professional responders, you may be asked or required to complete an incident report. Factual information can help investigators determine what happened, in the hope that future similar accidents can be avoided or that emergency personnel can be better prepared. Be aware that accident reports may ultimately be used as legal documents, so be as factual and objective as possible. Put down only what you personally witnessed and avoid speculating or offering opinions. If you don't know something, answer that you don't know. That makes the authorities' job easier, not harder. Media may also ask you about an accident. Be aware that following an accident, you seldom have all the facts and tend to be unobjective and emotional. Inaccurate comments can create problems for those trying to determine what actually happened, and can cause further pain to the victim or the victim's family. The best response is something like, "An accident investigation is underway, so I'm not in a position to answer questions. Please get a statement from the authorities when they have completed their investigation." As you learned in Section 4, after ensuring rescue safety and giving priority to providing CPR if needed, the appropriate first aid for suspected decompression illness is emergency oxygen. Except where restricted by legal regulations, this is a community standard because field experience shows that oxygen may significantly benefit a diver with DCI. Prompt emergency oxygen may make subsequent recompression more effective and decrease the risk of permanent injury. This isn't always the case, but there's no harm in providing oxygen if it ultimately makes no difference. Although similar to scuba, oxygen systems have some special considerations. First, handle them with care and keep them in their protective cases. Oxygen makes things burn rapidly, so extinguish smoking materials and flames before using it. Equipment used by oxygen requires special lubrication. Never use silicone grease on it. Likewise, keep oils or grease, including suntan oil, away from oxygen systems. Keep your oxygen system assembled in its case so it's ready to go in an emergency, and be sure to have it professionally serviced as required by the manufacturer. For a breathing diver, responsive or unresponsive, you will use the system's demand valve. Open the kit. Secure the cylinder by cradling it in the case so it can't roll or fall, but so you can still read the pressure. Slowly open the valve and check the pressure. Inhale from the mask to confirm its function, but don't exhale into it. Tell the injured diver, "This is oxygen. It may help you. May I give it to you?" After the diver agrees, put the mask on his face and tell him to breathe normally. With an unresponsive diver, you may assume implied consent. Having the responsive diver hold the mask himself may be reassuring. Monitor the supply. Don't let it run empty on an unresponsive diver. If the patient is too weak to use the demand valve, use the unit's free flow outlet attached to a non-rebreather mask. Set the flow rate for 15 liters per minute. Cover the mask inlet until the bag inflates. After getting consent, place the mask on the patient's face. If the bag completely deflates when he inhales, Increase the flow rate to 25 liters per minute. Again, watch the pressure gauge to avoid running out while the patient's wearing the mask. You use the free flow outlet also when giving rescue breaths to a non-breathing diver. Have someone set up the system for you while providing breaths. Don't let oxygen interfere with either rescue breaths or CPR if they're needed. Set the flow rate for 15 liters per minute and attach the tube to the inlet of the rescue breathing mask. This adds oxygen to each rescue breath. If the patient begins breathing independently, switch to the demand system or the non-rebreather mask. After you have a patient under care and emergency medical services on the way, manage the scene as best you can until they arrive, aided by other qualified rescuers, if possible. Your priority is to constantly monitor the patient's airway, breathing, and circulation, and if needed, provide rescue breathing, CPR, and defibrillation if an AED is available. Protect the patient against hot or cold. Control bystanders so the area is clear when medical personnel arrive. Pressure-related injuries almost always require recompression in a hyperbaric chamber, so maintain contact with Dan or other local diver emergency services. Have a patient with suspected DCI remain lying down and provide oxygen while emergency care arrives, even if the patient says she's feeling better. If they're delayed or you find yourself running low on oxygen for some other reason, give 100% oxygen or the highest concentration possible, as long as you can. This is better than trying to conserve it. If you run out of oxygen, but there's enriched air, nitrox, available, you can administer that to a responsive diver with a scuba regulator. It may or may not help, but it certainly won't hurt. As best you can, be prepared to give emergency medical personnel the patient's name, any significant medical history, the first aid given, dive profile information, any comments relevant to emergency care, and contact information for Dan or other local diver emergency service. The PADI Accident Management Work Slate puts all this in one place. Other than establishing buoyancy, calling for help, and providing rescue breaths, there's not much you can do for an unresponsive diver in the water. Continuing the rescue requires getting the victim onto a boat or shore, which can be simple or complex depending upon the environment and how much help you have. Although regular rescue breaths are the priority with the diver who's not breathing, you may have no choice but to interrupt them to exit. If so, first give 2 slow breaths. Interrupt for no longer than 30 seconds. Resume with 2 slow breaths, then continue into primary assessment and CPR if needed. The technique you will use for the actual exit will depend on your strength, relative size to the diver, and environment. For example, the saddleback carry works well when the victim's small and light compared to you. The pack strap carry is probably the most popular and useful because you can more easily carry a larger diver than with other carries. But if these don't seem workable, don't worry about doing anything fancy. Dragging someone out is fine if it works. There are numerous exits onto a dock or boat. If you don't have help, the lifeguard exit may be useful to move a victim onto a low dock or platform. The ladder exit requires a relatively strong rescuer and a very sturdy ladder, and usually the first rungs need to be below water level. Your instructor will help you find and practice the different exits that best match your characteristics and abilities. The environment and conditions can significantly complicate exits, especially with unresponsive victims. For instance, exits through surf make it harder to protect the diver's airway. The rescue breathing mask, which you can easily seal, is perhaps the easiest way to protect the airway when dealing with surf. Exits onto rocks, especially with surf, can be especially difficult and potentially dangerous. In fact, it is usually worth swimming to a more distant exit point without rocks, even if it takes longer to get out. If you find yourself in this situation, be careful and use the water to carry you and the victim up the rocks in stages. Take care of yourself first. You can't help if you become a victim as well. If you expect help quickly, you can avoid a difficult exit altogether by waiting for it to arrive. Help can make any part of a rescue easier, so always ask for it if it's available. Even untrained bystanders may be able to help you pull the victim from the water. Your priorities are providing regular rescue breaths and contacting emergency medical care as soon as possible. But in some situations, both may be difficult or nearly impossible, especially if you're alone. Do the best you can, however long it takes, or whatever you have to do. The victim has more of a chance out of the water with medical services on the way than in the water with no help coming. The PADI Rescue Diver course is both an experience and an accomplishment. By completing it successfully, you grow as a diver in ways that may make a big difference in an emergency. You've mastered new skills, so keep them fresh by practicing, reviewing, and updating what you've learned regularly. But reality check. It could happen that one day you're a rescuer in an emergency, and despite your best efforts, the patient dies. Or, perhaps not, but the patient must live with a serious permanent disability. Your rescue diver skills can't guarantee happy endings. All you can do with what you've learned and the resources you have is give the diver more of a chance, not certainty, of a favorable outcome. If in the end your efforts make little or no difference to the outcome, realize that you still made a difference. You gave the diver every humanly possible chance. Don't tell yourself, if only I'd, because the fact is you don't know, and can never know whether anything would have made the slightest difference. Usually, the reality is that nothing would have. No matter what the ultimate outcome, you did something wonderful. You reached out to help another person, and that's not a failure. It's compassion.